So where we left off last week was that rather than being disappointed per se and responding with great disappointment, why can't I build it? It wasn't my fault. I was killing people that had to be killed. Why can't I build? Because there might be a destruction later, or so I can't get to build the Beit HaMikdash. We learned all the details about how he responded with joy. And we're going to go forward from there. And I'm going to start first with just a footnote from last week. In the last pasuk from last week, so we had learned last week when we finished, Ki yimlu'u yamecha v'shachafta et avotecha. God says to David, and you'll remember we learned this, and we even learned the commentator who said there are 5 blessings and prophecies in this. Ki yimlu'u yamecha, David, you will live a full life. And we talked about that means 70 years. And we talked about what are the implications of fewer than 70 years, more than 70 years. What does it mean? You didn't live a full, not you, that a person didn't live a full life. I mean, what does that mean? Every life is full based on God's plan and calculations. If one person lives 50 and one person lives 90, each is a full life. What does this mean? So we talked about last week the idea of 70 is the standard of, let's say, the full life from which numbers go up or down accordingly. And and we talked about it. V'shachavta et avotecha, and you will, he says to David, you will ultimately repose. You will lie with your fathers. In other words, he will be buried with his family in the family plot. And the implication is he will die at peace. Let's just get that one out. Each time I told you when these little things go on the screen, that means someone's coming. And so he's telling David, you'll die in peace, not at war, the way Saul did. And I shall establish your son, after you, from which we learn implicit is that that the son God's talking about will not try to rebel against him and overthrow him. And I even shared with you that we're going to find tragically 2 others of his sons already alive at this point, when they would grow older, would indeed try to take over from him by force. One in a horrible rebellion, just horrible, the rebellion of Avshalom. And then later, a sort of, when Adoniah saw that his father was on his deathbed, rather than waiting for the father to decree who will be his successor, Adoniah sought to seize the reins of power. Well, this son that will come in the future will not be like that. He will ascend to the throne peacefully, and that will be Solomon, Shlomo. Asher Yetze Mime'echa, the son who will come from your loins. And because it says Yetze instead of Yatsa, the 2 dots on the bottom are called Sarah, and it's Yetze. And if there would be instead one of these like letter T, it looks like a kamatz, Yatsa would be past tense, meaning one of your sons who already came, who's already born. But God's saying Asher Yetze Mimecha, future tense, someone who will be born. So that's the prophecy. The son I'm talking about, to whom I'll be a father, and he'll be my son, and he will build the Beit HaMikdash, and he will be peace, and he'll ascend peacefully. He hasn't been born yet. He's coming. V'achinoti et mamlachto, and I will establish a dynasty forever. So I wanted to add one, let's call it a footnote, about this idea of 70 being a full life. And we basically, our textual source for this, our textual source, God's saying it, but where do we come to understand it that way? From Psalm 90, Tehillim Tzadi. Psalm 90, many of you will recognize it from Shabbat morning services, Shabbat Shacharit, Tefillah Moshe Isha Elokim, Hashem ma'onata hayita lana bedor vador, etc., etc. B'terem halim yuladu v'at chalel eretz tevel me'olam ad olam takel, and so on and so forth. And ki elef shanim be'enecha. It's a very contemplative, meditative psalm, Tehillah. Some Tehillim are psalms for the purpose of praying, God, please help. Some are for the purpose of thanking God. Thank you for this and thank you for that. Some of them, some Tehillim psalms, are for the purpose of contemplating and meditating on God's universe and on life. And this is one of those more meditative ones. David, or some say it was written by Moshe, Tefillah LaMoshe, a prayer by Moses, the man of God. There are all kinds of commentaries. We don't really want to go too far into that tonight. Did Moshe write it? Was it written but in Moshe's memory, in his honor? Anyway, but it's something it's worth. Anyway, you'll see where I'm going with this, why it ties in with what I just taught. But it's worth not completely missing out on its message. Tashev enosh adaka. In the end, people are going to die. Vatomer shuvu b'nei adam. And so there are different ways to understand it. But one way to understand it is that you're always saying it's not too late. You can still return, anyone, myself, you can still return to God. So you could both understand it as that he's saying that at the moment when time's up, God returns people to where they came from, dust, from the word dak, and he's saying, you return to me. In other words, returning up to heaven now, or God forbid. And another way to understand it is you always are waiting for people to return to the right path. But the important thing is to understand that we human beings are more than just mortal in the sense of mortal, but there's something much deeper going on in terms of mortality. This last month, we saw Republicans in their convention, Democrats in their convention, and lots of glory. We're not here to take politics into it, so we're balancing the two. Both conventions, behind the scenes, we never got to see it. Not only our class, but America. All the scratching and fighting as to who would get to speak from the podium. Obviously, Biden would speak, and Obama, and Clinton, Schumer, and Harris, and in the other one, of course, Vance and Trump, and whoever else I don't remember, it was a month ago, which is also a little bit of a point. But people struggle and they claw for honor. And who knows what degree fighting went on in the background. I should have a spot to speak also. I'm a senator from here. If you're letting a congressman speak, then I should speak. If you're letting a congressman or a senator from a small state, I'm from a big state, I should speak. Who knows what went on in the background? I'm up for re-election and I've got a tough race. I need the publicity. Why is he getting it? He's going to have a laugher. He's not that important. I'm the head of a committee. People are always, and it's not only that, it's in shul, for goodness sakes. Who's going to be on the board of directors? Some shuls, it's very peaceful. In fact, that's why in some shuls, they don't have real elections. They have phony elections. They have a committee, an elections committee. And the elections committee decides who's going to be on the next board. Then they submit to the membership, here are the recommendations. And the understanding is everybody votes for the recommendations. If someone wants to run against and it's not on the recommended committee, they're allowed to, free election, but they never get elected. And it's like that in all the organizations. It's decided by an elections committee who will be the next president of the American Jewish Committee of the Federation. They don't have the Federation, when they name a president, they don't have a vote throughout the city of all the Jews in the city. Who do you want this? We have 3 candidates compete. Nah, you're given a slate. and nobody votes. Glory is a big, big thing. The Tehillah is saying, and I'm just talking about shuls and this is everybody. This is everybody, everything. It's the office culture. Everybody wants glory and honor. But Elif Shanim Be'enecha Kiyom Etmol, Ki'avor. But God, you look down at all of the Lilliputians in the world. Lilliput, Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels. People so gigantic in their own minds, and really not. 1,000 years to us, well, that's a long time. It's just like a passing day to you, oh God. But Ashmor B'Layla, it's like the night watch. 1,000 years. What was 1,000 years ago? The year 1024. That's like overnight. That's an overnight watch. Zeram Tam Shena Yehiyu. Baboker Kachatzir Yachalof. Human beings. We're like grass in the field, in the sense that fall asleep, and grass becomes fresh. If you have a lawn in the morning, in the early afternoon, it's fine. By the night, it's all dried out. That's life. We God forbid, if we're on the wrong side of God's anger, forget about it. You place our sins in front of you. We're being judged. And here's where the interface is with the pasuk in the Navi. Yemei shenotenu bahem shivim shana. In light of what we just said here in this Tehillah, the Psalm, the finite aspect of the human being, the psalmist is writing, what are we? A life is 70 years. And that's where the Navi came up and the commentator came up. I believe it was the Malbim, maybe it was Radak. We learned it last week. I think it was Malbim, pretty sure it was Malbim, saying that a full life is 70 years. Where did he come up with that? From this pasuk, from this verse. A full life is 70 years. Again, someone who's going to live 90 does not automatically check out at the office like it's 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. and put the card in and say 70, end of story. For him or her, life is a full life is 90 years. And God forbid if someone dies younger, don't ever assume that's because they sinned. That if someone, God forbid, dies at age 40 or 50 of some disease or during the COVID, don't assume this one died, that one didn't die, because this one had a sin and that one didn't. We don't understand God's ways. There were plenty of the most righteous rabbis of a generation died in 2020 and 2021. I mean, really, Gedolei Yisrael, Gedolei Hador, the giants of the generation. And you probably personally may know of people or read in the papers. Some very good people died. And then there are a lot of evil people in the world, so they survived. So don't ever feel you can infer. A Navi, a prophet can, and only if God tells him. Because if it's only his own guess, we already learned, Nathan the prophet, his guess was that David will build the temple. And we learned only these past few weeks that if he speaks without God's authorization, he doesn't know. So we don't know why people die. But a full life, the psalmist says, is 70 years. The impegavurot shmonim shana. And if, someone has extra strength in life, he makes it to 80. We've been watching some of these recent years, some of these presidents. Reagan was the oldest president of his time. That famous debate where with Mondale, the questioner asked, should your age be an issue? And Reagan said, well, I've decided I'm not going to make age an issue, and I'm not going to use it against my younger and less experienced opponent and his young age. Speaking about Mondale jokingly. You look, even by Biden, despite the fact that he's falling apart, he made it to 80, pretty much. In fact, he did. And that's quite a thing, to make it to 80. And whatever your politics is vis-a-vis Biden, flying around the world, meeting with people in Normandy on that, meeting with people in Asia, flying back. I mean, to be able to live that lifestyle at 80, that's one of the reasons people are hesitant to elect a president at that age, because it's very tolling on the person. 80 is a long life and a strong life. For Rambam, it doesn't even get into 90. Interesting. And the point of the Psalm is that even someone who lives 70 and 80 and has a full life, most of it is a waste, is wasted time. Because before you know it, we all get cut off and we fly off. We fly off. What do I mean by wasted time? Give me an example. And we all live the same life. This is not wasted time. Learning Torah is the highest form of life, together with helping people and doing acts of kindness and tzedakah and chesed. I'll give you an example. Denise and I ordered certain things, food on Instacart. I don't know if that's what they call it in whatever state you're in, but they deliver the groceries to your door. Because of my because of my lung transplant and other reasons, we get our food with Instacart. Avoid certain COVID concerns. Okay, whatever. As you all know, everybody likes certain foods. Everybody does. And as you all know, as soon as a supermarket finds out you like a certain food, they stop carrying it. This we all know. They see, he always comes and he takes this brand. I don't think it's anti-Semitism. Maybe it is. But suddenly they don't carry that brand, or they don't carry that product. So Instacart outsmarts them. Instacart basically, if you want this fakakta brand and your favorite supermarket doesn't carry it, you can look under the column of stores, and they have like 800,000 stores, and you input the thing you want, and you find out the store that has it. Lantana hummus. I don't know if any of you have tried Lantana hummus. I mostly have Sabra. Because why do you think I have Sabra? I have Sabra because the Jew haters are boycotting Sabra. As soon as their boycott ends, I'll buy anybody's hummus. What do I care? As long as they're a boycott against Sabra, which is made in Astoria, Queens, okay? But it's got a Hebrew name. As soon as that boycott ends, I start buying whatever. Hummus is hummus. It's like water. Don't tell me we'll have a big argument later, but I will never be convinced that two humai are the same, okay? Humai. So anyway, Lantana has a few unusual flavors. Cauliflower hummus. Wait, why am I telling you this? You're going to order it and it won't be around anymore. Forget about it. So I'm trying to find it, and they stopped carrying it. So I found one place that carries it. So I ordered it. I ordered from that place, and you got to order a minimum of $35 of stuff. So I ordered $35, not of one product, but if you order $35, you don't have to pay the delivery fee. Okay. So, but there were like this was shopping day. And between Denise and I and our menu, we had a few things, and make a long story short, it's already too long. I ended up having to buy from 5 different groceries. In order to get everything, we ended up getting 5 different deliveries. And since delivery is free, I mean, I'd be glad. I'm not trying to employ all the people that lost their jobs during the Biden economy. This is better than price gouging and controls and everything. You want to have a full employment economy? Just try to order the foods you like. So anyway, this is Goz Chish van Ufa, the idea of Rabam Amav Oven. I spent a half an hour of precious time in my life. It's my life. I don't know. And I'm not just talking about me. If it were only about me, I don't think I'd get into this. I'm talking about all of us. I spent 30 minutes of my life bringing in the bags and putting them away in the proper place. This goes in the freezer. This goes with the third shelf in the fridge. This goes in the second shelf. This goes in the fruit basket. I spent 30 minutes of my life just doing what a 5th grader should do. It's like an IQ test, sorting the food. I'm never going to get those 30 minutes back, I don't think. Maybe God will say, you did a big mitzvah, you're eating, and I'll give you the 30 minutes back on the other side. I gave you a lung transplant. That's to make up for all the Instacarts for the last 40 years. But that's what the Navi is saying, and it's important to be mindful of it. That's why I'm really taking the time out on it. it is important to be mindful that most of our lives are a waste of time. Sleep you need, so that's not a waste. And whatever career we have, whether you're a secretary or a receptionist or a doctor or an attorney or IT or rabbi, that's not a waste. You're supporting your family. That's the way God created the world. God created the world that people should work, or they should sit and learn Torah, or they should do good deeds. But when you take out the hours of work and the hours of sleep, you've got a lot of wasted hours. And I'm, unlike a lot of Orthodox rabbis, I am not prepared to declare it a waste of an hour to watch an hour of television if that helps recharge your batteries so you can go back and do other things. But so much time is wasted. It's important to be mindful of it. And someone once told me, and I live by this credo among a million other credos, that at the end of every day, you should be able to say to yourself, I accomplished at least 6 things. Every day of your life, you should be able to say you accomplished at least 6 things. For different people, it's different things. Okay? It's different things. But to say, and it doesn't have to be 6 rabbinic things. It could be that I wrote a very important letter to someone. It could be that I posted a very important thing on YouTube. That's my case. In your case, it could be that a member of the family was sick and couldn't do his or her errand, and you did it for them. But you should be able to say, at the end of the day, there are 6 concrete things I did with my time. And even if there are, you still have Instacart. So what ends up happening, and for the guy at Instacart, one of his 6 things is delivering Instacart. But the rest of the day, he's got to do, or she's got to do other stuff. And that's what the Navi is saying. So a complete life means, in the words of Navi with Malbim and everything, is that David HaMelech will live at least 70 years, and they will be meaningful years, and they'll be wasted time. Even it's built into the 70 complete years, he's going to have wasted time. And we can infer that, and we're going to know that. But despite it, he will have had 70 years when he accomplished 6 things a day, so to speak. Looking back, he was a king at least six times a day that he did stuff. But this is very important to know. And that's God's bracha to David HaMelech. You will have, quote unquote, a full life. So we had done the rest of the chapter, and therefore I'm going to go right into chapter 8. We had already done it, but that was a loose string I wanted to bring back. We had just started chapter 8, and we resumed there. And we had just learned the first pasuk, the first verse, about how David now went to war. You'll recall, so I don't want to take out too much time on it, that he had begun a campaign of going to war and invading enemy countries. That he knew from the prophecy we just discussed that he cannot himself he may not himself build a Beit HaMikdash, but he is doing everything, therefore, within his human capacity to prepare everything so that Shlomo will have it all ready to just put the pieces together. And we've been learning the last 2 weeks, particularly how he gathered the wood and the stone and the gold and the silver, et cetera, and the working people, the stonemasons and the wood carvers, the carpenters, again, et cetera. And he had one last, and this is what we ended with last week, his one major task. He was told in prophecy that his son will be a person of peace who will not shed blood with his own hands, as David did with Goliath and with so many of the enemies of Israel. And to assure that his son can fulfill that part of his destiny, never to shed blood, David takes upon himself now, just like someone else thinking that his time is running out, and he starts preparing a will, starts preparing a trust, so that his assets can go through, or her assets can go through to the heirs without having to go through all kind of court interference and everything like that. And in the same way, David is thinking to himself right now, what else do I need to take care of to make sure that Shlomo has it already? Shulchan Aruch, a set table. I have to put an end to the enemies. I may not be able to exterminate and wipe out some of these horrifically evil nations, but I need to leave them so destroyed. Basically, I need them to be incapable of making war against Shlomo for at least a generation. I have to sterilize them. I absolutely have to castrate their military capability so that I don't just win a war, a battle, but they cannot, even if they want to, make war. And for this, we learned last week, first the one pasuk we did, Vayach Rechen, after that, Vayach David Plishtim, Vayach Niem. David attacked the Philistines and he humbled them. Vayakachet Meteka Ha'ema, and he took a location called Meteka Ha'ema, Miyad Plishtim, and it's very important here. And this is what I ended up with last week. And let me just remind you, he saw it's time to stop playing games and playing defense. And we will never have peace, permanent peace, unless we go into their place on the offensive and attack them on the offensive and bring them down on the offensive. And I tied it together as clear as day. That is finally what's happening in Gaza. There were 5 wars in the last 16 years before October 7. 5 times that Hamas broke ceasefires. There's no ceasefire with those people. Ceasefire is an English term that has one meaning, and to them it means rearming, coming up with new strategies, getting better weapons, building tunnels to fight. That's what it means to them. That's what it means now. When they negotiate in Cairo or whatever, they're not thinking of, we've had enough, uncle, and we're ready to stop fighting. You made your point. We made a mistake on October 7th. We're not going to do that ever again. We're just going to build Gaza to the beautiful place it was before we messed it up. That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking we're meeting because those idiots in America and those idiots in Europe really think we mean ceasefire. Those idiots, they don't know that one day when we're done wiping out Israel, God forbid, we're going to come for Europe and we're going to wipe them out also. Just as we did back in the 1400s in Spain, when we drove out the Catholics and we made it Muslim. Those idiots, they think we want peace. Haven't they ever opened up a Quran? Don't they know any Arabic? And so ceasefire with them is not what ceasefire means with us. And so whether it's whoever it is, I don't want to get into Republicans, Democrats now, not for this class. Netanyahu, I must say, is the smartest of the bunch, but he also is not 100%, and he's a little bit full of himself, and he has reason. And I'd vote for him. Well, I'd vote for Smotrich or Ben Gvir probably, but I'd be happy to have him as the prime minister, given who's out there. He is the one to be the prime minister, no question, in my opinion. So when I criticize him and coming from the place that, yeah, he's the guy for prime minister, no matter who I'd vote for, who I might prefer a little bit, those guys, they're not ready to be prime minister. But he was a little too smart for himself. And he decided, we're building it. I don't trust those Arabs. Unlike all the idiots in Europe and America, he's thinking to himself, I'm smarter than them. And he is. I don't trust them. So we built an Iron Dome, and we built David Sling, and we built Chetzpet, Arrow 2, and we put in $1 billion high-tech wall between Gaza. And so why are we spending so much money on a high-tech wall if we have a ceasefire? Because unlike those idiots in America and Europe, Netanyahu's thinking, I know they're going to try to attack again. Thing is, I'm making it possible they won't be able to do it. And so Netanyahu never did what he's done since October 7. He never did this because he knew it would bring terrible press, terrible photographs in the media, left-wing media that wants to make Israel look bad anyway. And so he didn't want it. And he had good reason. It wasn't stupid. He wasn't like he wasn't like Neville Chamberlain after meeting Hitler and thinking I brought peace in our time. He knew who he was dealing with. But until October 7, he didn't finally pull the emergency cord and say, Bibi, we are never going to have an end to this unless we go into Gaza and wipe them out. And we have got to wipe, not the people. They call it genocide, bunch of crap. We're not going to try to hurt Gazans per se, but we're going into Gaza and we are going to kill every Hamas. And if those Hamas hide behind Arab civilians, we'll give them a heads up, get out of the way. And if you're not out of the way, we're shooting anyway. And if 100 civilians are going to die at the price of killing 19 Hamas terrorists, we're going to do it. And ceasefire, we had one ceasefire where they demanded release of Arab criminals, and we went along and we gave him Sheikh Yassin, who went to Gaza and created Hamas. And for the 3 or 5 people we saved in a prisoner exchange, got back 3 or 5 hostages, we lost thousands of Jews in the meantime, later on. And then we had another prisoner exchange to save 3 people or 5 people or 10 people, and we gave them some guy named Yahya Sinwar, whoever the heck he is. Next thing you know, he's the head of Hamas, and it cost us thousands in order to save 3 people. And that's why Netanyahu was talking. Don't the media want to project their own thoughts? What would they be doing? So they say he's delaying on purpose so he doesn't have to face a trial. And maybe that's part of his, maybe it's part of his shikul, maybe it's part of his analysis, but essentially, he has come to the conclusion correctly that David correctly came to in our pasuk right now in the Navi, which is why we learn Navi. We don't learn Navi. Others learn the Bible for history, interesting history. They learn for Jewish history. They learn to learn about Jewish culture. Some people learn it for religious reasons. Christians, Jews study the Bible for religion on one level, and we learn on an even deeper religious level. There's got to be takeaways. You can't come away from chapter 8, verse 1, and simply feel, tonight I learned that David invaded the Philistines and wiped them out in Metagaima. We're learning that's the way you have to fight Hamas. And we have to apply it. And this time, finally, on the 6th round, they got it right. And that's why they're doing it. And that's why he's not quickly signing. When Biden, and it could have been a Republican also, when Biden or whoever bangs on the table and says that this war has to end now, and when Harris says, they have to have self-determination and we have to have a ceasefire, there are plenty of Republicans who would say the same thing if it weren't politically for their purpose. Right now, the balances are what they are. But and half of Israel agrees with Biden and Harris because they want Netanyahu out politically. That's what that's about. A few of them are the families. If God forbid it were my family, I could see I'd be demonstrating and demanding that they should do anything at any price to get the hostages out. You can't tell me as a member of the family you can't tell me don't demand the hostages go out at any price. And in the back of my mind, I'd be hoping that the government would be smart enough not to listen to me. I mean, I have to demand what I have to demand. I can't let my relative think that my relative is forgotten. And the country will go, if the country's going to give up 1,000 Arab terrorists as is being demanded in return for 30 hostages, and they're still going to hold 30 if they even have 30 more alive. So that's what Netanyahu's doing. And that's what David HaMelech was doing. Because it sounds otherwise like, what's this about? He's a good person, David. What is he like? Just a conqueror like Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan? David HaMelech, we've had enough of the Philistines already. It's like that first Star Trek movie when Captain Kirk kicks Ricardo Montalban over the cliff and says, I have had enough of, and then he kicks him off the cliff, you. And that's what it is. It's enough already. And my son is not going to have war with you. And I'm going to absolutely destroy your military capacity. And that can only happen if you go into the land. And now he goes to the next one. But that's how to understand chapter 8. In fact, it's so self-evident that we're going to have like 2 or 3 commentaries coming up on verses 2 and 3. And then for the next 10 Pesukim, there's no commentaries. Not that I'm not going to give you commentaries. None of the commentators that have so much to say on every word, No one even says anything from like chapter to verse 3 to verse 13, because he's invading country after country, wiping out their military capacity, and there's nothing to say. Of course, you need commentary for this. And that's what I've just shared with you. So let's take a look at the text. So he goes in and he finishes them off with the Philistines. And as you know, of course, again, Philistine, that's how the Romans came up with the name Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestine. It's Israel. It's even Jordan is part of Israel. But Palestinians, no such thing. They're Arabs. Okay. So, okay, we'll get to that next. He's done with Philistines. We're not going to have any trouble with them for a while now. Vayachet Moab. Now he goes to war against Moab. Here's Israel. They have not yet had the civil war, so it's one nice country. And there's Moab in purple. And that's why he goes at Moab, because Moab, of all these countries, is the most direct threat to Jerusalem and Judea. Though under David, it's the entire country. So you also have to deal with Ammon and Aram. Later in time, it'll even be Ashur, Assyrian. But he starts with Moab because they're across the street from Jerusalem. And he's got an issue with Moab that I did teach you briefly in a commentary months ago, and I would not be surprised if most of us don't remember it. And that's okay. That's why I'm here to try to remind you. What happened was, remember way back when, this part you may remember, he was fleeing from King Saul. There was nowhere in the entire country that he was safe. He had experiences where he fled to certain cities, hoping for shelter, and then he learned from the Urim and Tumim of the Kohen Gadol that the city was going to be turning him over to Saul if Saul came into that city and demanded him, that they were so fearful of what Saul did to the city of priests, Kohanim, of Nov, where he wiped out 50 Kohanim, simply because he accused them of having given shelter to David and gave him a sword, Goliath's sword, etc., that they were afraid if we don't hand David over to Saul, he'll wipe out our city. And David asked the Kohen Gadol to consult the Urim and Tumim. If Saul comes to the city and demands that they hand me over, will they do so? And the Urim and Tumim said, yes, if that happens, they will do so. So David had to flee again. He couldn't find a safe place in the land of Israel. And so he sought shelter. Bishano Toa David Tamo Lefnei Avimelech. Do you remember that he had to flee to the enemy country where Goliath came from? He was public enemy number one. He'd killed Goliath. He was public enemy number one. His face was on every post office. And he shows up in Moab. That's how desperate he shows up. He's so desperate, he doesn't know what to do. And if you remember, he started acting like he was mentally insane, started foaming at the mouth, made his hair wild and crazy, probably acting like, I'm not even trying to make a joke here, but acting like somebody in San Francisco, on the streets of San Francisco. Just looking like that. God knows what else he did. Just think of the streets of San Francisco. And they found him. Someone recognized his face. And they brought him to the king, and you're still acting that way. And the king said, we don't have enough mentally ill people in this country already that you have to bring me mentally ill people from Israel. Get him out of here. And it saved his life. While he was on the run from place to place, there was a time he was living amid Moab. To refresh your memory briefly, Lot, the nephew of Abraham, had been in Sodom and had fled Sodom when the city came under fire and brimstone. Lot's wife turned around, became a pillar of salt. He, to survive, fled into a cave, Zoar, and with his two daughters, and they got him drunk, and he impregnated them, and they had each a child. One was named Moab, and from the word Me'av, from father. The other was named Ammon, a more modest name, meaning from our nation. Moab and Ammon then grow up to become progenitors of nations of their own. And they're all in this area. And we've learned about that relationship on several occasions, whether we're allowed to attack their land because of that relationship, et cetera, et cetera. On one occasion when David was in Moab and had shelter with like his 400 men, you may remember in those days, he was like the head of a little army of 400 men who had come to him because they had nothing else. Maybe they needed the money, and why do people join these bands? And they fought under him, and he was able to support them financially through the spoils of victories. And all right. On one occasion, he and his men left Moab. They had to depart. And his elderly father and mother, we certainly know the name of his father, Yishai, David ben Yishai, Jesse. He left his father and mother, his family behind. They only brought the fighters, the men who fought, and left his family behind in the good safekeeping of the king of Moab, who assured him, I'll take good care of them. Don't worry. And when he came back, he found that Moab had murdered his father, his mother, his entire family, except for one brother. I don't even want to say, imagine that ever happened to you. Imagine, whenever I get into something like that, where I want you to imagine, but I'll say, imagine what happened to Ehud Barak. Imagine such a thing. Coming back, victorious at the top of your life, great victories. You're a fugitive from the king of Israel, but that'll work out. And you find out mother, father, the whole family has been murdered, has been wiped out, slaughtered. David at the time could not do anything about it. He determined one of these days, this will be an untied knot and will remain an untied knot for the rest of my life until we settle the score. But they will not get away with this. And if you'll say, isn't that revenge? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with righteous revenge against evil. Too many things are misunderstood in the Torah. People hear something and they don't understand that there are parameters to everything. And there are parameters to revenge. Is a Jew allowed to take revenge against Nazis, German Nazis? Of course. You know, they have these fictional TV shows, like that Al Pacino thing on cable, where like a group of people get together in America 50 years later and devote themselves to knocking off one by one, killing former war criminals, Nazi war. I mean, the sad thing about that is that it's fiction. It would be wonderful. It would be righteous to kill former Nazi war criminals. And when they finally caught Eichmann years later, it was like 1960. Well, the war ended 15 years ago, 1945. You know, give it a rest. It's been 15 years. He's not a threat anymore in Argentina. Leave him alone. No, not a single Jew, even the left-wing Jews. No one, there probably were left-wing Jews, the Bernie Sanders types, but by and large, 95% of the Jewish world understood. You drag the guy out of Argentina, bring him to the country, put him on trial, and then you kill him. And probably the biggest debate is, should you kill him easy or you kill him hard? And they killed him easy. They hanged him or whatever, and they threw his ashes in the water, like what we did to bin Laden. That's not revenge, bad revenge. That's mitzvah revenge. They were still looking for Mengele. Then they think they found something that might have been Mengele. And appropriately, mida keneged mida, measure for measure. When they reported a few years ago that they believed they found a corpse of Mengele, or the remains of Mengele, they did medical experiments to ensure that it was Mengele. So how do you know it's Mengele? So they did all these medical things, and it was like a certain mida keneged mida, that the last thing he did on earth before completely residing in hell was to have medical experiments done on him. But that's appropriate. So what we're reading here, also what we're learning here, is if it's revenge against Moab, it's appropriate revenge. And it's always been that way. And anyone who will say, no, I'm against the death penalty because we're better than that. No, we're not better than that. The one who's against the death penalty, he's not better than that. He's not better than we are. He's worse than that. Better than that is if a person needs to be executed, he's given a proper trial and all the proper things are done. And this person wiped out a family and slaughtered them, and of course he should be executed. Founding fathers in the United States, think about it. If capital punishment were cruel and inhuman, how is it that they had cruel, and how did they have capital punishment back then, while at the same time having the Eighth Amendment that bans cruel and inhuman punishment? What it shows is that in America, at least, the founding fathers were saying death penalty is appropriate, but not cruel and inhuman punishment. So where's David here? Vayach et Moab. Let's take that off the screen. And okay. Vayach et Moab, vayamadadem b'chevel hashkei otam arza. This is interesting. He smote the Moabites. Again, here are the Moabites next door, Moab. He slaughtered the Moabites, and those still alive, he had them lie down on the ground. Hundreds, thousands. He had them lie down like sardines in a can. He just laid them down, and he took two measuring, nowadays we'd call it a ruler, a pretty big ruler. He took ropes that were extended out, and what they're telling us is he measured them with a rope. Hashkevotam, he laid them down. Shochev is to lie down. Hashkev is to lay something down, or lay a person down. Hashkevotam arza, he had them lie on the earth, maybe for miles for all I know. And he measured so that basically at random, that he would execute 2/3 of the Moabites and leave alive 1/3 of the Moabites. Let's say there were 1 million of them. He decided, I'm going to kill 666,666, and I will leave 333,333 alive. And his father, last one, wait till that guy dies. He measured them out, but he moved David la'avadim nosei mincha, and the 1/3 that he allowed to remain alive became servants to David and to Israel. Let's understand this with the commentary. Take questions later at the end. So Rashi, commenting on this pasuk, this vengeance was because they killed his father. But maybe some of those individuals, maybe some of those, I'm using number randomly of 1 million, maybe some of those 666,000, etc., were not among those who killed his father. And maybe some of the 333,000 that survived did kill. That's not, these were the people. Go back to Gaza. There are no innocent Gaza civilians. That is a population that made war and has been making war and freely elected Hamas to represent them and make war. That's a population that's had tunnels under their homes, to have openings in their bedrooms, open trapdoors in their bedrooms that walk into Hamas tunnels. That's civilians. When the Israelis went in and found hostages, alive, not alive, Baruch Hashem, last 24 hours, they just freed another one, alive. They find them in tunnels or in houses being held by civilians. It's a nation of murderers. So that's what Moab was. This vengeance was because the people of Moab, killed his father, his mother, and his brothers. as it says, he led them before the king of Moab. So we find he never left from there. So let's see what that's about. Shmuel Aleph, 1 Samuel, chapter 22. So basically, and this is what I talked about earlier, now we can do it quicker because we already learned about it, so now we'll just see how it's in the text. In chapter 22, David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard, they joined him there. Now he's got the whole family together. Everyone who was in straits and everyone who was in debt and everyone who was desperate joined him. That's how he built an army. I talked about it just a few months ago. That's how he got his men. The 400 men weren't necessarily the top soldiers of the Jewish people. Rather, they were desperate people with no income and needed somehow to stay alive, and heard that some guy named David is hiring. And he's the son-in-law of the king, and he's on the run, but he's a pretty good fighter, and it'll be exciting. There'll be adventure. There'll be spoils. He became their leader. There were about 400 men with him. David went from there to Mitzvah of Moab. And he said to the king of Moab, Moab, may I leave my father and mother with you. May my father and mother come and stay with you. Until I find out, I'm going to have to leave now. I'm going to have to keep running place to place until I finally figure out what God's long-term plan for me is. God willing, I'll be able to find sanctuary, peace, and life, and then I'll come back and I'll retrieve my family. And so he led them to the king of Moab, and they stayed with him as long as David remained in the stronghold. And so David was in Moab with his mishpacha. And then the Navi at that time, God, not to be mistaken, of course, with G-O-D, God said to him, it's time to move on. And now you have to go back to Judea. And so David left, and Saul heard that David now is coming back into Judea, etc., etc., etc. So the last we heard is that David left his family behind in Moab. Yalkut Shimoni talks about it at Siman Kuf Mem Zayin, and he talks about it in the next verse or two, that David was kind to a king named Hanon, the son of Nachash. Well, what's that all about? Amar Berachia b'shem Rav Elazar ben Padat. This rabbi said that he learned from that rabbi, Ma chesed asa Nachash im David. If the text tells us that David was kind to some foreign king, Hanon ben Nachash, what in the world did this king do to David that merited later on having kindness from David? Amar ka'asher asa avivi madi chesed, ela k'shehaya David borech min Shaul, halach David v'chol beit aviv etzel b'nei Moab. Well, what happened was, when David was fleeing Saul, he and his entire family came to the people of Moab. Omar lahem kiblu beit Abba. He said to them, please allow my house of my father to be here, accept him. And El Kishahaya David Borech min Shaul, Holech David v'chol beit aviv etzel b'nei Moab, Omar lahem kiblu beit Abba. Shneimar explains it. Vayomer yeshev na avi ve'imi. Please, may my father and mother reside with you here. Kiblu otam. And the Moabites accepted them, welcomed them. V'chevan sheyatsa David amad melech Moab harag la'aviv ulimo ul'achiv ul'echav kol shel David. And as soon as David and his men left Moab, the king of Moab arose and killed David's father, his mother, all of his brothers, and only one brother from the entire family. You'll remember there were many brothers. You may remember when God sent the prophet Samuel, to anoint the king of Israel who will follow Saul. And then Shmuel went to the house of Yishai, Jesse, and found all these fine, strapping young men, and was inclined, Samuel, to anoint the oldest, strongest. And God said, no, that's not the one. And then he went to the next brother. No, that's not the one. And then next, no, that's not that one. And it went until he got to the youngest, the shepherd, David. So David had a lot of brothers, and they all were wiped out. Shneimar Yehuda Eliyahu me'achai David shelo nishta'er mehem ela hu ubarach mimelch Moab b'halach etzel Nachash melch b'nei Ammon. Now, while David was fleeing from Moab, leaving his family behind, his next stop for sanctuary was with the king of Nachash, the king of Ammon. Shalach melch Moab Amar Nachash, the king of Moab, who went on to destroy and wipe out David's family, sent messengers, emissaries to Nachash. Shema ba'etzlacha? Etzlacha echad me achei David? Has anybody from David's family fled to you, like that one remaining brother? Because he's going to have to be killed too. Can't leave anybody alive. Because anybody who remains alive is going to be on a vengeance for the rest of his life. Amar lo lav. The king Nachash responded, no, haven't seen anybody. V'shamro ad Shabbat David. And that king Nachash guarded David's one remaining brother until David returned. L'chach amar David e'aseh chesedim Chanon ben Nachash. And that's the reason that David was kind and gracious to that king. So Malbim further comments on this, measuring out to kill 2/3 and leave 1/3 alive. Vayachet Moab, he wiped out Moab. Perish Chachamenu Zichronon Levracha, our sages of blessed memory, taught in Bamidbar Rabbah, Perek Yud Dalet. That's the Midrash, very, very similar text to the Midrash I just read you in Yalkut Shimoni. Ba'avur shahargo et aviv imo bevorcho mipnei Shaul. Kama shekatuv Shmuel Aleph, Vayinachem et Pnei Melech Moab. Just as I taught you, that in 1 Samuel 22, verse 4, the king of Moab had accepted the family, assured David that they'll be in good hands. And when he thereupon learned afterwards that the king had wiped them out, Nokam Mehem, David avenged them. The Harag Mehem Shnei Shlishim, and David wiped out 2/3 of Moab, of the Moabite people. Ubaderach bizayon hishkivo tam arza, and didn't just wipe out 2/3, but rubbed it in to bring additional humiliation and shame on them, making them all lie across the countryside by the hundreds or thousands, that they all had to lie as he was measuring them. He did that, but derech bizayon, this was very, very personal. Velo hikpid lahachayot hagiborim ki hayu la'avadim nosei mincha ratza lomar porei mas. And so he left some alive, that they would be people who would carry water for him and do that kind of stuff. But other than that, he avenged. We're a little bit past just a touch. Let's quickly get in all those verses now that won't have commentary, so we can really feel we covered a good solid half chapter on this theme. And also, otherwise I'd have to repeat so much of what we did today to set the context. So just let's take a look at it quickly. I'll do it mostly in English. David next defeated Hadad-ezer, the son of Rechov, the king of Tsova, who was then on his way to restore his monument at the Euphrates River. Well, Euphrates River, that's kind of like up in Iraq. So he took down Hadad-ezer of Tsova. David captured 1,700 horsemen and 20,000 foot soldiers of Hadad-ezer's force. David, hamstrung all the chariot horses. I'm just going blank on that word. He's not sterilized. You know what it is. He made it that they're never going to have new horses. Just going blank a moment. Hamstrung, except for 100, which he retained. So he, whatever. I hate when I forget a word that's so obviously. Anyhow, So he captured 1,700 of the horsemen, 20,000 foot soldiers of Hadadezer and Sova, and all the chariot horses. There are different kinds of horses. There are show horses. There are horses created that are trained for war. There are horses that primarily are beasts of burden to carry things, horses to run in the Kentucky Derby. He saved 100 for himself, but he basically left all the others unable to procreate. And when the Arameans of Damascus, Aram, to remind you again, it's verse 5, when Aram, reminding you, this is Aram in the bluish green, call it seafoam. So he's going up. He goes from Moab up to Ammon, up to Aram, and one by one, he's taking them down. And when he gets to the Arameans, but to Aram David lavadim nosei mincha, he took them alive. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. And essentially, he neutralized all of them. David took the gold shields carried by Hadad-ezer's retinue and brought them to Jerusalem. Gold shields, like imagine people with a sword in one hand and a shield in the other hand. Hadad-ezer of Sova had his men with shields made of pure gold. And he brought that to Jerusalem so that it could be added to the available gold metal that Solomon would have for building and beautifying and plating the Beit HaMikdash when that time would come. It could be melted down into gold, whatever. And from Beitach to Beirotai, the different cities of Hadadezer of Sova, Lakach HaMelech David Nechoshet Arbe Ma'od. He also took a tremendous amount of brass or copper, also for the Beit HaMikdash. And when King Toi of Hamat heard that David had defeated the whole army of Hadadezer, he didn't know what to do. David's on a warpath and he's wiping out everyone. And by the way, not necessarily even knowing what David's intentions are, what his thinking is, that David's doing it to provide a peaceful world for his son, King Solomon, when that boy is born and builds the temple. Well, Toi sent his sons, Yoram, to King David to greet him, Olo l'shalom, to greet him in peace and to congratulate him on his military victory. Our dear, dear friend David, how much we love you, how much we are your allies, doesn't want to get wiped out. For Hadad-ezer had been at war with Toi. Okay, friend of my enemy is whatever, an enemy of my enemy is my friend. So he basically is coming forth and saying, I've been at war with Hadad-ezer, as you know, and now you wiped out Hadad-ezer. So you don't have to fight us because we're on your side. We're natural allies. And of course, as often as not, that's not necessarily true. Well, because Iraq and Iran are murdering each other for 10 years, wiping out millions, doesn't mean that when one of them is out of the picture, that the other one suddenly becomes the good friend of Israel or whatever. Yoram brought with him objects of silver, gold, and copper, and that worked its way. King David dedicated these to the Lord, along with the other silver and gold that he dedicated. What does that mean he dedicated it? Hikdish, Mikdash, Beit HaMikdash, Hekdesh. He essentially established that this gold, silver, copper may not be used by anyone, may not be melted down and made into utensils or whatever. It must all be brought to Jerusalem and stay and wait until Solomon is ready to build the Beit HaMikdash. And as he's building with all the other gold, silver, and copper I already have amassed, this is now added. It'll have even more gold and silver and copper. And he took it from all the nations he conquered, from Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Well, that's our map. Edom, yellow, Moab, purple, Ammon, orange. We just went through Aram. All across, right? The west side, he doesn't have to go to war. That's the Mediterranean Sea. South, there, no problem. Phoenicia, on the northern border, that's King Hiram. Hiram, he's going to actually help build the Beit HaMikdash. He's going to send, we've learned that in the past, we'll learn more in Malachim, Book of Kings. He'll be sending, he's an ally. He's a true ally. The ones that have to be dealt with are this. What is today the country, the so-called country of Transjordan, or Jordan, whatever you want to call it. So from Edom, me Aram, me Moav, me Bnei Ammon, me Plishtim, me Amalek, from all these people he conquered, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Philistines, Amalekites, and Hadad-ezer. David gained fame throughout the Middle East, throughout the world, when he returned from defeating Edom in the Valley of Salt, 18,000 in all. He stationed garrisons in Edom, last pasuk for today, I believe. Yeah. He stationed garrisons in Edom. He stationed garrisons in all of Edom, and all the Edomites became vassals of David. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. Vayosh Hashem et David b'chol asher halach. David reigned over all Israel, and David executed true justice among his people. Vayimloch David al kol Yisrael, David osem mishpat utzedakah. The Bible, which is inspired by God. The writing of the Bible is God's inspiration. David is deemed to have been one who executed true justice. So the killing of all those nations was righteous in the eyes of God, the Bible, the Tanakh. That was part of justice. When a murderer is executed in a proper way, through a proper trial, whatever that country system is, if it's fair justice, not Stalin, NKVD, communist, middle of the night, arrested and murdered overnight, when there's a proper system and true murderers are given a death penalty, that's justice. It's always been justice. Until the last 50 years, first 200 years of America, it was always justice. Last word, then I'll take Jonathan's question. When Abraham Lincoln, of blessed memory, was murdered, they found everyone involved, and the ones that didn't kill themselves, knowing what's going to happen to them, all were hanged. No ands, ifs, or buts, and they were hanged right away. There wasn't a thing where you have 35 appeals and you go back to the Supreme Court and you're back and habeas corpus this and habeas corpus that, and they end up dying of old age before they ever get their punishment. They were knocked off, I think, in a month. I could be off by a day. They were basically all executed right away. When James Garfield was assassinated, the mental case who killed him, the guy wanted to be ambassador to France, and Garfield did not take him seriously. So he decided, I'll show him to take me seriously, kill Garfield. He was executed right away. Everybody got executed right. You didn't have John Wayne Hinckley shoots the president of the United States. And so like the guy, Sirhan, who murdered Bobby Kennedy, the original, and who might have become president of the United States. And now every 2-3 years, he comes up before a parole board saying, true justice, it's time to let me go. These guys should have been executed right away. And that's what Torah justice would be. And it's a good job. That's not evil. That's justice. And so we're learning Tanakh, and we're also learning about justice, and it applies today.